Blog Talk Radio.
Opening music provided by bensound.com. Welcome, everyone, to today's Earth Energy Forecast Show on this Friday instead of a Tuesday, December 13th. Yes, Friday the 13th, 2019. Thank you for listening today, or if you're listening later to the podcast. I am your host, Joan Cerio. All right, well, after many technical problems during the last attempt at this show, we're going to do it again, and hopefully with no problems. Today's show is going to be about why eating organic and local matters, and I'm going to have a friend of mine, Maureen Knapp, come on and tell us about that. Maureen farms with her husband, Paul, at Cobblestone Valley Farm in Preble, New York, which transitioned to organic management in 2000. They are a diversified dairy, selling their milk under the Organic Valley brand through Crop Cooperative. Certified organic chicken, turkey, beef, and strawberries are direct marketed from the farm along with farm-raised pork. Their website is cobblestonevalley.com. Her email is maureen@cobblestonevalley.com, or you can call her at 607-591-9607. Welcome to the show, Maureen.
Joan, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for doing this do-over with me, and hopefully Friday the 13th is a lucky one for both of us.
I sure hope so. And everybody else too, right?
Yes, and everyone listening, yes. So please, let's start by telling us about organic agriculture. What is it, and how did you get into it?
Sure. Well, organic agriculture, one thing that sticks out with me is it is the most regulated food in the world, and that is done by or through the organic standards, which now are held by the National Organic Program. But as far as that technical standards go, underneath that, organic is actually a biological system. And what that means is that as organic farmers, we use nature as our teacher, and we look towards the biological systems to guide us. What organic is often described as is in the negative view, as in what it is not. There are no antibiotics in organic. There are no synthetic pesticides in organic. There are no added hormones in organic. And that is generally how organic is described. And the way I prefer to describe it is that it is a biological system. And the root of that biological system, if you will, is the soil. One thing that made a great impression on me is when I learned that there was a gentleman, a soil scientist, who was talking to us, and he had a tablespoon in his hand, and he scooped up a tablespoonful of soil, and he said, "Can anybody guess how much life there is in this tablespoon of soil?" And so hands went up, and various answers were thrown out. And in the end, it ends up that in that one tablespoonful of soil, there's over 1 billion microorganisms. And you just think about that for a second, over 1 billion in something that size. And for me, the epiphany was, well, the soil is alive. The soil is a living medium, and without that soil, we don't have any food. And so when you think about organic, it's about honoring and working with and continuing the biological systems of that soil medium that Mother Nature has done for thousands and thousands of years. And we as men are wont to do, or women, try to do things our own way and make the changes that we would like to make. And so, again, with organic, we are working with nature as our teacher.
So, that's interesting. And like you were saying, it sounds like what we've been trying to do, not organic farming and agriculture, but traditional ways, is to try to find ways that are better than Mother Nature. And,
exactly.
And there's an intelligence that is in Mother Nature that you just won't get through any other means.
Exactly. And one of those things, I guess, an example that we can point to is genetically modified organisms, or not just organisms, genetically modified plants. Probably the one with the biggest success are those plants that we call Roundup Ready. And when something is genetically modified, instead of making changes through traditional breeding, the genes are spliced into the organism to bring about the change that is desired. And so when we have Roundup Ready plants, what that means is that the plants themselves have been engineered so that the poison that is Roundup that kills all of the other plants on the ground does not touch the desired plant. So some of the plants that are Roundup Ready, of course, are corn and soybeans, and there's some alfalfa, and there's some other plants as well that genetically modified versions of these plants can be sprayed with this Roundup herbicide and not be touched by it. And I know a lot of people view that as a good thing, and I know probably just as many people view that as not such a good thing, because we just don't know how that will affect us in the future, A, and B, it is so counterintuitive to be spraying poisons on the food that we are later to eat. And then C, what do those sprays do to the life in the soil? And one way I like to think about it is by likening it to the use of antibiotics. And when somebody uses antibiotics, very often you cannot just target the individual organism that you are looking to target. When you take antibiotics, it generally wipes out quite a lot of the gut. It's not discriminating. It takes everything out. And it's very much the same way when you're spraying different things on the plants. It wipes out the life in the soil, at least in the upper portion of the soil, the topsoil, shall we say. And that then provides a clean slate for other microorganisms to come in. And it also, the spray also kills the life that we can actually see in the soil. So the earthworms, the ants, et cetera, et cetera. And when the life in the soil begins to die, that's when we begin to lose topsoil. I know I'm taking a winding pass on all this, and hope I'm holding people with me.
Yes, because that's the way things work in nature and in the environment. One thing affects another. And I think it was important for you to bring up the fact that even though the plant is Roundup Ready, people may think, oh, okay, then I don't have to worry about Roundup. No, that means
exactly.
It's ready to have Roundup sprayed on it and still survive. And that's going to go into your food source. And
exactly.
It's also going into the soil so that when you're growing something else, you don't have the same flora, you don't have the same microorganisms in that soil
exactly.
that are helping that plant, because it's a symbiotic relationship a lot of times with things. and everything is affecting everything else. I mean, we don't live in a vacuum, whether it's in Mother Nature or in the universe. I mean, everything affects everything else. And I think that's really important to bring up that point and to show people just how nuanced agriculture has become and how savvy you need to be in order to grow food that's conscious, in a conscious way, organic and healthy, and still be able to keep your business going.
Exactly, Joan, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head. You didn't exactly say that everything is connected, but everything is indeed connected. And we all need to be aware of that. And once we start separating things out and breaking them down, things are not necessarily the same. I think we all can agree that the whole is almost always greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
why did you and your farm, Cobblestone Valley, decide to go organic? Since it sounds like there's a lot to this. Why did you decide to go organic?
Sure, there is a lot. There were two reasons, and one was economic, and the other one was ideological. In that it was just the right thing to do. We've got where our farm is located, we've got a trout stream that runs through it, and that trout stream originates in a wetland that is actually our farm, actually part of our farm, a major wetland in the area that we live. And the water that flows past us goes into the Tiafneoga River, and the Tiafneoga goes into the Susquehanna, and it eventually ends up in the Chesapeake Bay. So who would think that what we do on our farm can impact people all the way down in the Chesapeake Bay? And it kind of goes back to that everything is connected thing that we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, the ideological part of it is that what we do on our farm affects so many different people, and trying to do things that are for the good. We think about organic having healthy soil, and the healthy soil is there to raise healthy plants. The healthy plants are consumed by the animals on the farm, and the animals or the animal products are consumed by the people. And so we're trying to keep things healthy all the way along.
Mm-hmm.
And we do things in organics, we try to do things more proactively. We try to do things preventatively rather than coming to the rescue with something at the other end when something goes wrong. And by that, I mean nutrition. We provide nutrition for the soil, and it goes on up the chain. And then the people that consume the organic food are pretty healthy too. So, So at the time that we made the transition, I don't know how many of your listeners know about the dairy industry, but the conventional dairy industry, farms do not know how much they're getting for their milk until after it has left the farm. So I don't know how many people could make a living not knowing what their paycheck was until a month after you did the work. It's a very fraught way of living because you just don't know. Mm-hmm. So organic also provided us stability. The economic model with organic is that we are provided a stable pay price, and it's not that it doesn't change. It's that when it does change, the farmers, at least at Organic Valley, the farmers are involved in the change and have input in it, and the change is extremely rare versus the up and down cycle of conventional milk. And so we were at a point, because our farm, we're on the smaller side. We milk about 60 cows, and we were at a point where we could no longer sustain the up and down cycle of the milk prices. And then we had a meeting with Organic Valley. The CEO came out and had a meeting in this area, and I think about 10 farmers attended, and we never looked back, and we're glad that we didn't. We've been happier. We've been sustainable. We love what we're doing. We share what we're doing with lots of people through our sales, and all is good. The kids, too. The kids are grown now. We have 3 boys, and they also grew up and learned the organic lifestyle, and they're doing really well with their nutritional needs as well.
So what did you have to do in order to get certified organic? I'm imagining that you had to go through some kind of a process, especially with Organic Valley. What did you have to do to become a certified organic provider?
Good question. Sure, there's actually a lot to it. When we transitioned nearly 20 years ago, the process was 1 year long. So for 1 year, you needed to have all organic inputs, and then at the end of that year, you were certified organic. The rules have since changed, and now the transition to organic for a farm is 3 years. And so
wow.
It's a long time, and it's well needed to flush all the toxins out of the system, but it's extremely difficult because you need to buy organic inputs. You need to buy organic hay, organic feed, and yet you are still getting the conventional milk price. So there's quite a disparity in what you're laying out versus what you are getting back for those 3 years. Now, there is often some money available, at least for Organic Valley producers, that will help you through that transition time. And it's much needed, because the other aspect of going through transition is, at least with dairy, is that you often lose production when you change to organic management. And that has to do with how you feed the cows. The cows need to have at least 30% of their dry matter intake, and that's a technical term I apologize for, but they need to have that much of their intake from pasture, and the rest of that can come from various different stored feed things. But when you have been feeding a lot of grain and hay, and then you switch to a forage diet, your production will go down. In the end, that's all good because it's much healthier for the cows. Cows were really bred and made to process forage. And what had happened over some time is that the farmers could see when cows are fed more grain that the production is higher, but it's not necessarily the best thing for the cows. And so you have all these factors that you're working against. You have 3 years of buying inputs, and your production is a little bit lower than what it has been. So the transition is difficult, as I said, but in the long run, very worth it.
Yeah, so for those 3 years, you're probably the amount of money that you're being able to bring in has probably been curtailed quite a bit, I'm imagining.
Indeed, yeah. And so it is a difficult transition, but after that, when you begin to receive the organic price, which, as I said before, is a stable price, so that you know exactly what you're getting and when you're getting it.
For the milk.
And then for the milk, and during that transition time, you also get a sense and a feel for organic. And the other kind of nice thing is that there are a lot of meetings that farmers can go to talk to each other, to see how everybody got through the transition when they made it.
So what about all of the animal products that you have in the strawberries? Was there a separate thing that you had to go through to get those certified? And is there a cost to file for certified organic, to file for it? Not even just to go through the process, but to file for it.
Well, it's not to file for it, but it's when you decide that you've made the decision that you're going to transition to organic. There, at least at the time that we transitioned, there wasn't a cost, and that's a good point. I believe that there probably is a cost at this point for a certifier to come out and evaluate your farm and let you know where you stand in moving towards organic, because there is help needed from certifiers. So there probably is. It's a nominal cost. I don't think it's very much to have the evaluation of your farm done. But when you make the decision to go organic, there's definitely a cost for certification, and that cost is incurred every single year. I talked earlier about how organic is the most regulated food in the world, and that's because of the standards that need to be adhered to, and it's also because every single year a farm has to go through an organic inspection, which takes about a day. At least for our farm, it takes about a day. And then the cost for that inspection is based upon, it's based upon your organic sales. There's a percentage of whatever your sales are goes towards your certification fee.
So you have to pay for that. And then what about the animal products and the strawberries? Is there a separate certification for them, separate from Organic Valley, from the milk, or?
No. So the way that works is the entire farm is certified, and then Organic Valley is something a little bit different. So Organic Valley is the co-op that buys our milk from us, and in order for us to be a part of that co-op, we of course have to have an organic certificate. And so every year when we go through our organic inspection, we need to send our updated and new certificate to Organic Valley to have so that we're able to continue to sell milk. And back here on the farm, everything that we do as our farm, and each farm is a unique organism in and of itself, everything that we do on our farm is encompassed within that organic application and inspection. I guess I forgot to mention the application. Before you can be inspected, there's an application, or sometimes it's called a farm system plan, and that's unique, of course, to each farm, that needs to be submitted into the certifying agency. And after that is reviewed, then the inspection appointment is set up. Mm-hmm. Our particular certifying agency is NOFA, New York, which is the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New York. And there are certification agencies all over the country, and organic farmers can choose their own. All of the certifying agencies are under the umbrella of the National Organic Program, and that National Organic Program, or the NOP, are the ones that certifies the certifiers, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Is that under the FDA?
USDA, yep.
USDA.
The Department of Agriculture.
Yeah. USDA, yes. Okay, makes sense now. So what is a typical day like on your farm? Like what, you have milk products, you have meat products, you have strawberries. Especially during, let's say it's during strawberry season in June, what's a typical day like?
Okay. Okay, well, June is probably the busiest month that we have on the farm. And so, all right, I will walk you through a typical day, and that would be with Paul getting up. His alarm goes off at 4:30, and he heads over to the barn to get the cows back in from the pasture, because during June it's pasture season, and the cows are out on pasture all night, and they get milked, and then they go out on pasture all day, and the cycle begins again. So Paul will head over to the barn and bring the cows in. And
how does he bring them in? How do they know to come in? For those who've never been on a farm,
Yeah.
Come on, cows.
They know the drill.
They know the drill. The animals are smart,
Well, what happens is the cows are moved to a new pasture every single time they are milked. It's called rotational grazing, and so they are actually in a different pasture each time you go out to get them. At this point in time, the way they know that it's time is we have one of those ATV vehicles. We call it the Kubota. Mm-hmm. We've had Polaris. So the Kubota will go out, and they'll see the Kubota come out. They'll lift their heads from grazing, and then they start to walk towards the gate. So they help you out. usually. Sometimes they get a little bit lazy and they hang out, but that means that they've had some pretty good feed in that particular pasture, and they're not so eager to get in to get milked. But so the Kubota will be kind of their signal, and then they'll walk down the laneway, and there's a network of laneways, and they'll walk towards the barn. And on our farm, we have a tie stall barn, and that is that the cows go into individual stalls, and we bring the milking machines to them, versus a lot of farms have something called a milking parlor, and that's kind of the opposite of a tie stall in that the cows come to you, are milked, and then they move on and go out into a different holding area. So two different methods. Probably the parlor method is a little bit more efficient, but sometimes you have to work with what you've got. Our farm infrastructure is well over 100 years old, and so that's what we have, and that's what we're going to use. So anyway, while Paul is doing that, I am changing the daily message for people who want to come pick strawberries and letting them know where we are at in the season and what the picking conditions are like and what we might do if the weather starts to rain or things like that. And then after I do that, I'll probably go out into the bird pasture. At that point in time, we have several groups of birds on the ground because we raise broilers, and we have a flock of laying hens as well. And so I'll go out and I'll move the birds. The birds get moved. That's a whole other story, but the birds are also on pasture, very, very important. And I will feed and move the birds, and from there I'll come back in and probably head out to the strawberry field because we open up at 9, and people will be coming in there. Sometimes I am out in the field with customers, and sometimes I have somebody who can help me out. So let's say that I have somebody that can help me out on this day, and then I'll probably move inside and do a little bit of paperwork and thinking about the marketing on the farm, whether it's the strawberries or the birds. That's kind of an ongoing thing that's always going on. Paul will come and check in and tell me what's up and see if there's anything else that needs to be done or anything that he needs my help with, and probably we'll circle back out to the strawberry field to see how things are going there or if there are any orders. And then from there, it's probably time to bring the cows in again and do the evening chores for the birds. And then amongst that, the strawberries will close for the day. And then we'll get the cows back out to pasture and do it all again the next day.
And do you do your own slaughtering there?
For the birds, we do. We have a processing facility right behind our shop where we actually sell the birds, and I would invite anybody to come and take a look if you'd like to do that. It's always good to know where your food comes from and see how it is taken care of and how it's given death, which is very humanely, and it's part of life.
Yes. So when Paul brings in the cows, he's hooking them up onto machines, right, to be milked?
Yes. Well, he'll bring them in, and there's 42 stalls. They're just tie stalls, and the machines kind of sit on a rack that will slide down the alleyway of the barn, and there's 8 milking machines, and so you prepare the cows, and then you put the machines on, and then as the first cows finish up, you'll take the machine off, and you just kind of keep going down the barn aisle that way. Yep. And then the milk is goes through a pipeline into the milk house, and then it sits in the bulk tank, and the milk truck comes and picks the milk up every other day.
So it's further processed or whatever's going to happen to it outside of the farm.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a full day.
It is a full day. Yeah. Yes,
so
it is.
Why are organic products more expensive? People
Okay.
like, well, and, it's always so much more expensive. Well, they're not adding all these chemicals. Why is it more expensive?
Yeah, and that is always a great question and one that I love to answer. And my short, pat answer is that organic food is not more expensive. It's that conventional food is too cheap. And here's why. Conventionally speaking, people go out to the grocery store and buy their food and bring it home. And they pay for that money out of their wallet. And I think what most people do not realize is that they also pay for that food out of their tax dollars that they pay. The environmental catastrophes that have happened under our current organic system are paid for by taxpayers. The subsidies for the subsidies for agricultural commodities are paid for by taxpayers out of their tax wallet. I think also what people may not realize is that the corporations, the large industrial food corporations, are the ones that make out, because they are the benefit of the subsidized prices that farmers are paid. So the farmer raises their food, and it costs, let's say it costs $10 for them to raise. The price, they can't get $10 for it. They can only get $8 for it. So then a subsidy of $2 is added on so that they meet their cost of production. Well, that $2 subsidy is paid for by the taxpayers, but whoever is buying the food benefits from that $8 below production cost. So consumers are paying for their food in ways that they do not realize that they're paying for their food. Mm-hmm. And with organic agriculture, it's all there in front of you, and the price is higher on the shelf, but not only is it an all-inclusive price, but it is also a nutritionally superior product for the people and for the animals and for the earth.
Planet.
For the planet, exactly.
And there's probably costs later on down the road for people from eating and consuming all of these pesticides and herbicides.
Exactly. And thank you for bringing that up. I forgot that other end of it. Yes. So, you are what you eat. And when you can eat the best you can possibly eat, even though it costs you a little bit more now, you are hopefully avoiding the medical situation, whether it's just going to doctors or having doctors trying to figure out what is wrong and not really knowing. If you can look at it that your food is your medicine, and it's just a different mindset, and organic food will certainly help you out in that way.
Mm-hmm. How does sustainable food farming relate to organic farming? You hear about sustainability a lot now.
Sure, you do. You hear about sustainability a lot, and then the new buzzword seems to be regenerative. But
okay.
When you do,
well, explain that too.
Yeah. Okay. When you do things sustainably, and of course doing things organically, we like to think that we are sustainable. That is leaving things as you have found them. And that can be good or that can be bad. You're trying to not take anything away. You're trying to not stress the system. And what would really be ideal is, again, I mentioned regenerative. That is not only leaving it as you found it, but also leaving it in a much better state than how you found it. So there are some land can be, as long as land has not had any inputs, any synthetic inputs for the past 3 years, it can be organic. And that doesn't necessarily mean the land was in the greatest of conditions those last years. So there is a term out there that is it's organic by neglect. So it has not had any inputs put on it, synthetic inputs on it, but neither has it had anything else put on it at all. In animal agriculture, manure is our gold. It's our freebie, if you will. We get the animal product plus we get what comes through the animals, and that is so incredibly good for the soil. And if you have land that has not had any animals on it or anything else, then it's not necessarily the best land. And so to regenerate, you want to keep putting the biology back onto the soil and have the soil grow its own lifeline and fungi and everything else. And so when we farm organically, we want to, at the very least, sustain the life that's in the soil, and ideally we really want to improve and keep building that biological system within the soil.
Add back the nutrients and the nitrogen and all. Yeah.
It's a beautiful system, isn't it?
It is. When we, honor what Mother Nature already designed. So how does organic farming help the planet? I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about that, but is there other ways that being, farming organically help Mother Nature and Mother Earth?
Well, let's start off talking about the animal agriculture aspect of that, and that with organic farming, we talked briefly about the grazing standard, and that beef and dairy cattle need to get at least 30% of their dry matter intake from pasture. And when pasture is covering the ground, that sequesters carbon. When you've got row cropping going on, where a lot of conventional farms feed their cows mostly corn and soybeans, and those are row crops, and the ground is not covered. The ground is left exposed except for where those individual plants are. Not only that, those plants are harvested every year, and that leaves a lot of bare soil and a lot of carbon floating around out there. So the best sequesters of carbon are grasslands and trees. And when you think about trees and you hear about all of the burning going on in the rainforests around the world, that really affects the carbon balance in the atmosphere. So as organic farmers, that's one of the things that we think about most. We've got riparian areas around our streams. We've got buffer areas between our farm and our conventional neighbors. Each organic farm, if there is a conventional neighbor around them, needs to have a 50-foot buffer area so that no pesticide drifts can come on to any portion of the organic farm. And that area is also covered. It's either a hedgerow or just a buffer strip of grass that is mowed. So we do think about the whole system when we farm organically. We're not trying to break things down into parts. We're trying to look at things holistically and make them work together as a system.
So you talk about buying local. How does buying local make a difference for you and for the community?
Yeah. Well, when you're buying local, you are supporting small farms. And what's been happening over the last couple of decades is, if you pay any attention to farms at all, the farms are getting larger. Farms are getting larger and fewer. And the way that happens is when a small farm ages out or goes out of business, then the larger farms around are eager to pick up the land from when that farmer goes out of business. And so the farms then get larger, are becoming larger and much more industrial. And so if you can support your smaller local farms, and hopefully especially the organic local farms, those farms will be able to survive and hopefully even thrive and not have to sell out to the industrial counterparts when the time comes for them to sell. I believe the average age of farmers in this country is 61 or 62, and that's not good. That's not not a good metric there. And there are a lot of deterrents to bringing younger people on. Probably the first of which is the workday that I described earlier. It's not. Sometimes people view farming as romantic, and it does look romantic, but it's just it's never ending, and you have to be prepared for that way of life, and so that's a deterrent to younger people. Land use, land acquisition is a huge deterrent to young people who want to come in and start farming because land costs so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think, I'm sorry, I took a little detour here, but I think you were talking about how to, or you were asking about buying local and buying organic. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. We direct market here on the farm, but there are thriving local farmers markets in towns, and there are regional markets around as well. And buying local sometimes is much less convenient than going to a supermarket with one-stop shopping. We've got a great crowd of people that are happy to come to our farm, and on our part, we try to make it as easy as we can for them to do that. I'll work with people in many different ways to help them get what they want, because I know that convenience is huge in the busy world that we have. And the other thing that we like to do here is we'll work with other farms and carry their products as well, so that there's, again, a little bit more of a one-stop shopping for the people who really are intent upon their own, their own health, and then also supporting the farms so that we'll stay here. It's a really nice community, Joan. I have to say that.
I remember it.
Yeah, it's one of the fringe benefits of what we do is people are so wonderful and so grateful. Yeah. So I guess I would just urge people to go find your farm and find your tribe, and
because it sounds like, Maureen, if we don't support the small and especially organic farms, it doesn't sound like there's a good future here.
That is my fear,
because,
honestly.
Yeah. That these larger farms, these larger, they're almost like corporations, it sounds like, come in and buy you out, and, if it's not handed down to the next generation,
exactly.
then it goes conventional. It'll go back conventional because they can make more money that way, and they don't care. It's about the bottom line.
And I want to be clear that I don't want to denigrate conventional farmers. They are doing what they were told to do. 20, 30 years ago, it was get big or get out, and that's where all of the extension services were going. And the conventional farmers listened to what they were told to do, and now I don't know. I can't imagine a large farm with thousands of cows and thousands of acres. I can't imagine it going back in the other direction, simply because it's locked into the current situation. The subsidies that keep big farms going, we mentioned those earlier, with that are paid for with our tax dollars. Those subsidies go mainly to the large farms. It's not that small farms don't get them, but the large farms are. The whole system is set up for large farms to need those, rely upon those subsidies in order to keep going.
Well, we also have to feed a growing population of, I don't know, what is it, 10 billion people now? I don't know, but, it keeps going up and up. So, we have that factor to consider, that we have to feed all of these people. How can we do it if it's small? if it's so small. But I think that as more and more people become more aware of their food and want more organic, and that seems to be getting a lot more attention lately, that things might change and go into that direction.
And how wonderful would that be? You know, I always think about the landscape dotted with many small farms as opposed to few industrial-sized ones. And, you know, when anybody thinks about a farm, they do think about the smaller farms, the old McDonald's farm with all the different things. And when people think about farms in their minds, I don't think that they think about, you know, multi-thousand cow dairies as farms. It's really because I guess they're called farms, but it's much more industrial in nature than it is when somebody thinks about what a farm is in their mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we're in a time where we're in climate crisis almost, certainly
For
climate
sure.
change.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it's global warming, whether you believe it's a cyclical thing that happens with the Earth's magnetic field, that it flips, because we're in the midst of that too. Whatever the cause, we can't deny that, you know, the weather is not what it used to be.
For sure.
So how does that affect you and your farming, and how do you change, or can you change to adapt to all these climate changes?
I don't know about changing or adapting, but I do know that if we just keep our eye on the prize, which is the biological system that we've got going on our farm, we will be that much better. The two things that farmers dread most are drought and too much rain. Either one, either way can really make or break a farm. You know, with too much water, you cannot get out there to harvest your hay. When you put the cows out on pasture, they just make mud of the lots. And then with too little rain, the opposite happens, and you need to start feeding your stored feed, whereas you would normally be out on pasture grazing, and that sets you back financially, of course, because when you're feeding your stored feeds, you're going to have to buy more stored feeds, and because there's a drought, they're not available, and the price is higher, and, you know, it just keeps going around. So really drastic weather events can affect farms for several years because of that, because of the financial implications of it. And that's no fun either. So far here in the Northeast, we've had pockets where things are difficult, but there hasn't been, you know, as like Southern California or even in California with the terrible rains and mudslides or the fires or whatever they have there. You know, thankfully we don't have that here. We're much more tempered, and we do not usually have to worry about droughts. But it's a great point, and I don't even know how to you know, stave that off, other than we need to keep the soil and the life fed, and then we really need to keep the ground covered. Those are two of the main things.
Mhm. Mhm. So you're really at the mercy of the weather when you farm, and you know, you don't know, you can't predict what the year is going to be because you don't know what the weather is going to be necessarily, and that certainly can affect your bottom line each year, correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, you put it well. And, you know, as I'm listening to some of the things that we're saying here, I'm wondering, why would anybody ever want to farm? but it does have its rewards.
Thank God
for
they
sure.
do.
It really does. Yeah. And, you know, Joan, speaking of that, if anybody's listening, we're always looking for some good help, part-time or otherwise, on the farm. It's hard to keep people working the hours that we work, and so we've moved more towards more part-time people, and in the hopes that we can use some people to fill in the hours that we need help with. So, you know, just putting that out there in case anybody's listening and wants to give farming a try. Come on and come see us and let's talk.
It's very, very healthy to be outside most of the time and to be doing
Sure.
physical work. You know, I think it's a great way to just help you, help themselves, and help Mother Nature, just to be out. And
Yeah.
you know.
And there's good food involved as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a park right there. You know?
Yeah.
And what kind of work would they be doing? Like cleaning stalls, setting up
really
for
depends
milking?
upon the person. You know, it depends upon the person, Joan. Some people have mechanical abilities. Some people have operating abilities. Some people just want to be out in the sunshine. You know, it depends on the people, what their talents are, what they're looking for, and how much time they have.
That's true. You have to be a jack of all trades as a farmer.
Pretty much. Yeah.
You have to be able to fix your equipment, or at least know how it runs, and
Exactly. Yeah. So
there's a lot to it.
And So and then for anybody who is interested in some resources, maybe about organic farming, or in finding local organic food near you, there's a couple of websites that I like to point people to, and one of them is NOFA New York. They have a regional food guide within the entire state of New York. I think you just put in what you're looking for in your zip code, and voila, you'll have some answers there. Another good website is eatwild.com, and that is geared towards more grass-fed, looking for grass-fed beef, pastured poultry, things like that, and that's national. And then the other website I like is Local Harvest. Again, if you're looking for different types of food, and you just enter those and put in your zip code, and they'll help you find local and organic food as well. Although each is not exclusive, you can, it doesn't have to be organic. But so those are good. Those are good sources for people if they want to start thinking about getting a little bit more organic food in their diet and helping out Mother Earth.
And local farmers.
Yeah.
That would be great. And that Local Harvest, is that localharvest.com or is it .org?
Yeah, good question. I think it's .com.
Local Harvest.
Okay. Yeah, it'll come up. Yeah, I get a lot of referrals from local Harvest, so I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And the question I have is that you say you have organic chicken, turkey, beef, but you say you have farm-raised pork. What's the difference? Why isn't that termed organic?
Thank you. Yeah, so everything that we have on this farm is certified organic, with the exception of our eggs and our pork. And our pork is managed organically in that everything the pigs get to eat, and the pasture that they're on is certified organic. All of that is certified organic. But the reason that we can't certify the pork is that we buy in the piglets. We do not raise our own piglets. That would be one more thing to do here. And the piglets that we buy in sometimes are organic, sometimes they're not organic, and it's easier to just plan on them being not organic and sell the pork as pasture raised or farm raised. Even though they get organic grain, we raise them basically on organic milk, and then they're out on pasture, and so all of that's organic. They just did not come from an organic source. That's all. We get them when they're 6 weeks old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you have supplies of all of this meat readily available most of the time if people wanted to go and purchase this?
We usually do, and probably if anybody has any interest, the best way to see what we have is the website. Our website is cobblestonevalley.com, and then I put out at least monthly newsletters to update people as to where we're at. So, for example, tomorrow I've got a sale day on the farm where people will come. They can get 10% off. We've got lots of beef, but we don't have a whole lot of pork because the pork is going to leave the farm at the end of the month, and then next month we'll have plenty of pork. And so those types of things are important to know. And I do have those, I do have that on the website, which I update probably weekly. And
they can sign up for your newsletter on the website?
They can, yes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Anybody that wants to do that, or just email me, or anything. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So is there anything else you want to share about organic and local and what it's like to do this really service? You know, it's a service, really. It's what it is.
I guess it is. I hadn't thought of it that way. I would just, nothing new. I would just like to reiterate that organic farming makes a difference to everybody and everything. And the more that we can do to support our local and organic farms, the better off it will be for us who are listening and for families. Everything is connected, and let's try to keep it all natural.
Yes, let's. Well, thank you so much, Maureen, for coming back again. And then we had a successful show today. I'm so happy. So thank you so much. And I don't know if I'll be doing a show next Tuesday. Unfortunately, the way the week has been going, I don't know about any of you, but I've had a humdinger of a week. So I was going to have Dr. Helen Caldecott on Tuesday. She's a lifelong anti-nuclear activist and environmentalist, and she lives in Sydney, Australia, and unfortunately I miscalculated time because of the time change and missed her yesterday to tape the show. So in case she's willing and we can do it, I will have her on next Tuesday. Otherwise, we'll see what happens. So enjoy the rest of this Friday the 13th, everyone. I hope it's a lucky one for you. Thank you again, Maureen, for coming on, and all the best, everyone. Much love.